Hello everyone, welcome to the spoiler talk for Daredevil Born Again, Season 1. Now then, before we fully get started, let me just say this. This is going to be very much different from the other spoiler talks that I've done. As in, if you've watched my episode talks for Daredevil Born Again, yeah, that's basically this. It's just an extended version of that. I'm combining all of the episode talks into one big video. I thought that would be easier and also less time consuming for me personally if I just combined them all instead of talking about it all over again. Even though I wouldn't mind that, because the show is absolutely really good. I mean, I have only seen 4 episodes so far at the time of recording this section, so maybe my opinion will change with the remaining 5, but for now, this show is peak. So how about we just get into that first episode? So, in universe, it's been about 7 or so years. We are now in the year 2025, and the gang, they leave Nelson and Murdoch's office in order to head over to Josie. And then we have new characters and old characters kind of interacting. We got this woman talking to Foggy, with Foggy hitting her up, kind of, but it's going a bit awkwardly. We also have like a celebration for a retirement of a guy named Jerry. Who is he? I don't know. Nobody knows, but he's retiring. So, I guess that's important. I don't even know who you are. I can't celebrate this. I don't know. If this was Mahoney, I could have celebrated or something like that. But my boy. But I don't know. You were not in Netflix. But also, that is because of the fact that this show is basically a Frankenstein of sorts. Because it's a combination of what originally was made and what is new. The thing is that what originally was made was supposed to be a reboot of Daredevil. However, Marvel finally saw the light and learned how stupid that is, because you already have a bunch of established stuff that you can just pull from. You have a fan base that you can immediately interject into this. It is perfect. Why are you abandoning everything you've done before? So they decided to redo it a bit, and most of this episode is actually redone with some elements from the original show still apparent. One big one that I'll talk about later. But basically we have, you know, just some fun at Josie's until Foggy gets a call. So Foggy steps outside, and apparently on the other side of the phone we have a guy named Benny, and Benny's like, he's coming for me, they're coming for me. And Foggy's like, calm down. So Matt hears this, and this scene is fantastic. Alright, the way that the aspect ratio changes to focus on Matt and then like zooms in on Foggy, I love the way that was done. But Matt is like, hey Karen, let's go outside, there's trouble afoot. So they go outside, and turns out there was a problem at the Red Hook pier. I think that was a pier. I don't actually remember, but I think it was a pier. But there was trouble there, and Foggy stashed the guy. But he didn't tell Matt because of the fact that he didn't want to give Matt another excuse, I guess, to be Daredevil. Continuing on the whole, you know, the one annoying part for me about Foggy. I will say that. I love Foggy. We need to stop talking bad about Daredevil. Come on, dude. So Matt heads off in order to help, because we also can see the fact that there's this really cool scene of the guy who is hunting Benny, I guess. There's a fly, and he just like kills it with like a paperclip, which immediately goes like, alright, that's Bullseye. Even though the logo is on the gloves, it doesn't matter. That's Bullseye. Simple as that. But Bullseye goes for Benny. So Matt goes, suits up, and then has a very awkward sequence because of the fact that they use CGI. Yes, the CGI in this, first of all, welcome officially fully to the MCU, because that is an MCU trait. But I think that the CGI in this episode is a little bit worse, specifically because of the fact that this was part of the reshoots, which were done like, I think last year maybe. So that's why the CGI looks a bit wonky. I don't mind it. I grew up watching the Arrowverse, okay? Unless they go that bad, I'll have a problem. But they have not gone that bad yet. But we get to see Daredevil. However, turns out Benny gave the location of Foggy because Bullseye apparently wants the location of Foggy. So Matt overhears this, and then he heads back. However, a gunshot is shot, and Bullseye has shot Foggy and 2 other people that don't matter. But Foggy! He shot Foggy! No. Look, I know nobody liked Foggy, okay? I will be honest here. If you were around back in 2015, 2016-ish, nobody liked Foggy. Everybody hated Foggy. I liked Foggy. I was like in the minority of like Foggy fans. But Foggy gets shot. Matt heads back. And before Bullseye can shoot Karen, Matt intervenes, and they have a bit of a fight, which, look, a hallway fight, kind of, in like the first episode. You're just starting off that big. That's a new one. Also, this one is infused with CGI, which means this is automatically the worst. But overall, I still enjoyed it. But they fight and they fight, but also what I find funny is the fact that Bullseye is just taking people out while fighting Matt. He just takes people out. But eventually, Bullseye's able to get away, takes more people out. Matt goes after him, and throughout the whole thing, we hear Foggy's heartbeat. So they go all the way up to the top. And they, Matt gets the upper hand on the fighting there. However, then Foggy's heart stops. Matt breaks down, and Bullseye gives him like a shoulder tap. Like, what? The sadistic bastard! He killed Foggy, and then he just shoulder taps Matt. What is wrong with you? But Matt, at that point, he's done. He frags him off the roof. He just throws him off the roof, man. He hits the floor with Karen immediately getting scared. She looks back, and I guess she's a relief because, like, oh, thank God it's not Matt, because I can't lose two of them. But he throws him off the building. Foggy dies, and then we have Sherry there, who learns that Matt is Daredevil, and that's basically where that part ends. So let's just talk about this before we continue on, obviously. Yeah, I don't know how to feel about Foggy's death. Like, I'm not upset like most people, but that's because of the fact, like, 2 years ago or something like that, maybe 3, there was that leak that came out where it was like, yeah, Foggy's gonna die. This was before the overhaul. So even in the original Daredevil Born Again that was not connected to the Netflix stuff, Foggy was still gonna die, which, by the way, that would have been horrible. We wouldn't have known that Foggy. The emotional moments would not have worked. But we knew that Foggy was gonna die back then. Also, before I actually watched this episode, I made the mistake of going onto Twitter. And on Twitter, people were talking about a comic book issue where Foggy apparently faked his death. So I'm not gonna be sad about the death of Foggy until we get to the end of this season. And also, Foggy will return in season 2, either in flashbacks or maybe present day. Who's to say? But the actor is coming back as Foggy in season 2. So maybe, they faked his death. So I'm not really gonna be super sad because of that. But if this is real, I'll cry. Also, I've seen people be like, why Foggy? I don't know why he goes after Foggy. I got nothing, okay? I mean, maybe it's because of the fact that you remember at the bulletin when Bullseye was there to kill the one guy in season 3, because by the way, the reason that this is late is because I was at my mom's place for the past 2 weeks because of the fact I was getting a new floor. I watched season 3 and The Punisher, the entire series, over at my mom's place, and I was like, maybe Bullseye killed Foggy because Foggy punched him. But I don't know. My guess is just he wants revenge against everyone involved. But Vanessa is too difficult to track down because of, well, we'll get to that later on. Don't you worry about that one. But because of what Vanessa is, she's a little bit more difficult to track down. So it's best to just go for Karen and Foggy and Matt. They were part of it as well. Why not just kill them? Maybe it will be explained later on. Maybe he's a hired gun. But if Bullseye is working for Fisk, that is gonna have some major problems because of, season 3. But overall, I am indifferent about Foggy's death. I'll wait until the end of the season before I really talk about that. But before we continue on, there's a little bit of a thing that I missed while I was at my mom's place that I noticed here, and that is the fact that they talk about White Tiger in episode 1 of Daredevil Born Again. I missed that, and also on the TV, you can see him fight. You can see White Tiger fight, so I like that. I like that that is immediately here. But then from that sad death, we get into the intro. Now, normally, I don't really talk about intros because intros to me are like whatever. But this one is important because starting off, it is a new intro that infuses the old intro into it. But I love the way how from Foggy's death, we get to the intro where everything just breaks down until we get to the Daredevil portion. And the full original intro pops in. We start hearing it as we continue on throughout the intro, mainly when like the Nelson and Murdoch sign falls down, but then like we fully get back into it when we have Daredevil Born Again kind of thing. I love the way that the intro works. But then we jump to 1 year later. Yes, I also wish we could have stayed with Matt in order to see how he handles it, but we jump to 1 year later because that's when the show takes place. And Matt is still sad about Foggy. And also Vanessa has become the queen pin of the underground world while Wilson Fisk was off, being in the MCU, being in Hawkeye, being in Echo. Mainly being in Echo is kind of what ruined everything. So we have a meeting between like 2 gangs, one of them being the Tracksuit Mafia from Hawkeye, this time not as goofy as they were in the Disney Plus show. And then Vanessa and me is like, alright, look, Red Hook is off the table, which means that there is some importance there. We'll get there maybe one day. I don't know. At the time of recording this, I've only seen 3 episodes. I'm recording this the day before episode 4 comes out, which here in the Netherlands is on a Wednesday, not a Tuesday. which makes me mad. But as Vanessa is doing her Vanessa things, which, by the way, from the end of season 3 to this, I love the way that she's more involved now. But anyway, Fisk appears, everyone leaves, and Vanessa and Fisk start to talk, and it seems like there's some problems between their relationship, sadly enough, because of the fact that Wilson Fisk was off being an Echo, basically. That is what, you know, kind of broke them apart. It wasn't really the Hawkeye stuff, because, like, Vanessa's like, you got shot in the face, I sat beside your bed, and then you just up and left. And it's like, yep, that's Echo. So during the Echo stuff, Vanessa was being the queen pin, I guess, holding down the fort, while Fisk was just going to his not real daughter and doing all that stuff. And this is also why Bullseye couldn't find her, because, you know, she is now the mastermind of the underground. It's a little bit more difficult to get to her. Best to take out Foggy and Karen first, then go for her. Simple as that. But after that, we also have this new thing that this show is gonna do. I'm not really gonna talk about it unless it actually really has any importance. It's just basically the people's views on what is happening in the episode currently. And it's called the BB Report. And the only reason that I'm interested is because of the fact that this woman, this girl technically, is the family of Ben Urich. R.I.P. the boy from back in season 1. I miss him. I've always missed him. I liked him a lot. Also, Matt is now working with Kristen. And that law firm is called, let me see here, Murdoch and McDuffie. Alright, I like Nelson and Murdoch more. Had more of a ring to it. Really? This is what you were gonna give us? Murdoch and McDuffie. Really? That sounds stupid. But Matt is getting ready to give his speech at the sentencing of the legend of Bullseye himself. So let's go to the sentencing of Bullseye, who apparently in that whole rampage between him and Daredevil also killed 11 people, including Foggy, but killed 11 people. This man, it's just, while fighting Daredevil, he just, like, killed, like, 8 extra people, if I remember correctly, because he killed Foggy, shot 2 people, and then Daredevil fought him, so he killed about, like, 8 people while fighting Daredevil. This man's insane. And Matt gives a very powerful speech. Here's Karen come in, and Bullseye has no remorse. He gets sentenced for life, and I love Charlie Cox's acting there, which is like, yes! Basically, he just wants to get up and be like, yes! F you! But he can't do that. So, Matt and Karen talk, but it turns out Matt did his classic Matt thing. As in, when Foggy died, he shut everyone out. Karen tried to get in contact with Matt, but Matt kind of pushed her away. And that has broken the friendship. So now, she's moved on. She's moved to San Francisco, and Matt has officially quit being Daredevil. Guess Foggy kind of got what he wanted at the end of the day. But don't worry, he will be born again. And also, Karen isn't necessarily too interested in rekindling the friendship, because Matt's like, I don't think a tragedy should destroy everything. And then she's like, well, yeah, I mean, technically it's his fault because of the fact that he ghosted her. Alright, that's technically on him. But then Karen gives Matt a broken horn that she found at Josie's, and then leaves. So afterwards, Matt is angry cooking, and Fisk announces his candidacy to become the mayor of New York City. And he has a whole team behind him, and he takes notice of one guy there who apparently was cheap and brought in 2,000 signatures, a man named Danielle. Also, for anyone wondering, how is it possible that Fisk can run for mayor after seasons 1, 2, and 3? You've seen the scheming that he did back in, like, seasons 2 and 3. Mainly in season 3. Like, he played the FBI in order to get what he wanted. Like, I'm 100% convinced Fisk used a playbook that he had in order to get himself out of prison because of the snap. He used that chaos in order to reduce his sentence, then got out a free man, built himself back up, and now is running for mayor. Entirely believable. Also, we get a nice little reference in the BB report about the fact that Fisk killed someone with a car door, which was in Daredevil season 1, which I did not expect that, but I love that they referenced that. Meanwhile, Kristen sends Matt to Heather, who needs legal advice. So Matt goes over there. However, Heather was told that this was going to be a therapy session. And instead of, you know, them just being like, well, all right, you know what? Hey, mistakes can happen. Let's leave. Instead, apparently, they form like a connection and a romance. Sure, why not? And also, Cherry is now Matt's investigator. And he has been looking into Fisk. However, it seems like Fisk is very clean. He used clean money, no criminal ties at all. They basically wiped all the criminal ties away. Which is something that Fisk would 100% do. And Matt's like, you know what? Hey, if Fisk wins, New York will get the mayor it deserves. So Matt then decides to go and talk to Fisk himself. They go over to a place to like a restaurant place. I don't know what that place is called, but still, they go there, they sit down, and they have a little bit of a talk. And man, these two actors are so good. They are perfect in their roles. But I love the way that they talk to each other. They don't really talk hostile towards each other, but also they're not really friends either. Matt is like, you've gained more muscle and lost a lot more fat. But I like the way that they talk to each other. Also, to anyone who's wondering, because I've seen this as well, and I would like to explain that since I've recently seen season 3. Why doesn't Matt just go after Fisk? Well, it's a simple thing. Matt basically was like, I'm gonna come after you if you come after Foggy and Karen. And he hasn't done that. So, Matt is still like, look, if you start doing crime, I'll come after you. Simple as that. But I'm not gonna be Daredevil anymore because the line was crossed. I almost killed Bullseye. You know, I lost it, okay? If I kept being Daredevil, I would have killed someone. In a way, kind of like the arc of Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man in Spider-Man No Way Home, which I thought was fun. But also, Fisk promises that he is going to stop the vigilante. Spoiler warning for the next episode. Fisk will create a division called the Anti-Vigilante Task Force, or whatever it was called, in order to stop vigilanteism. So then later on, it is official. While Matt is on a date with Heather, Fisk becomes mayor of New York with 53% approval rate. Also, apparently Vanessa cheated on Fisk, which is like, oh, why? Also with a guy named Adam, but why? And Fisk is like, look, I'm not gonna go after him because I'm not him anymore, okay? I'm not the old me, okay? I'm the new me. Which kind of goes into the whole, like, is Fisk really a good person now? Or is he still a garbage person? Like he's always been. Which, Matt, I also like that about that diner scene. Matt and Fisk are both don't believe the other when they're talking. Because Matt's like, look, I'm done being Daredevil. And Fisk is like, no, you're not. And Fisk is like, look, I'm a good guy now. And Matt is like, no, you're not. I love the fact that they just, like, call each other out kind of on that. But Fisk promises a better tomorrow. And then to end the episode, we have, like, a red light for Matt and a white light for Fisk. So let's get into that secondary episode then, shall we? Before we start episode 2, however, the episode kind of starts off with a little bit of in memory of Kamar de los Reyes, who is the actor who portrays White Tiger, who sadly enough back in the year 2023 passed away. Sadly enough. He does a really good job in this and the next episode, because these next 2 episodes are completely dedicated to him. So let's just get into it. First of all, Happy New Year, everyone, because apparently it's now 2027 at the beginning of this episode, which means that the back half of the last episode took place in December, like around December 30th, maybe 31st of 2026. Now we're in 2027. It's also ironic that Ross has won the presidency, and then this show happens, and then he becomes president, because give him a couple of weeks and he'll officially be president. But Fisk gives a speech about his hatred for vigilantes, and he names the Punisher and Spider-Man. Well, not necessarily Spider-Man, because he's like the spider guy, but whatever. Also, to anyone who's like, can we get Spider-Man and Daredevil Born Again? Maybe season 2. No, apparently there's a contract in which Marvel isn't allowed to use Spider-Man in TV. So, if you want the crossover between Daredevil and Spider-Man, you gotta wait for a Spider-Man movie, because it's never gonna happen in Daredevil Born Again. At least not for now. Maybe they can make a deal later on. Meanwhile, while this speech is happening, we have a man named Hector who goes down the subway. A man is screaming for help, gets beaten up by 2 others. Hector tells them to back off. They don't. A fight erupts, and Hector beats both of them until one guy trips over another guy and falls right in front of a train as he gets killed by the train. And then the other guy is like, I'm a cop, you're under arrest. And turns out these were dirty cops. Something that this show, well, Daredevil in general, has never really shied away from. The other seasons, like, look, I heard people online talk about, like, oh, they're finally doing dirty cops. It's like, they've been doing dirty cops since, like, the beginning. Don't you remember that? Season 1, Season 3 of Daredevil? That had a lot of dirty cops. They've been doing that storyline throughout. But he gets arrested. After that, Fisk is talking, and you can see that his hand has a couple of wounds on it. Also, it doesn't really seem like he really wants to do his mayoral duties, because he's like, can we delay this stuff, you know? Can we delay these visits? And then the woman is like, no, we can't actually. It's like, fine. But we can see some wounds that might come into play later on. Not in this episode, and not in the next one. However, there is a little bit of trouble here, and that is the fact that Vanessa's lack of involvement is very troubling for the public, and they don't like that. So then Matt is at a cop station, and he's finishing up with a client. However, he hears Hector getting beaten up, so he decides to go over there and become Hector's lawyer. And they have a bit of a talk. Matt immediately believes him. We get another one of those classic heartbeat, telling the truth kind of thing. You love to hear it. I love that throughout the whole of Daredevil when we had it, you know. I mean, in that first part with Karen back in season 1, we had where he listened to Karen's heart. I love that. I love when we get Daredevil's, like, powers. It's so cool. But he decides to become his lawyer. Meanwhile, Fisk is on the road. However, they are stopped by a hole in the ground. So Fisk gets out. He's like, fix it! It's like, well, actually, we can't really do it because of all the red tape. We kind of need to wait for approval. He's like, I am the mayor now. Fix the hole. And then he's like, look at people. I have fixed hole. And then that Daniel guy is like, wow, Fisk, you are really good at filling holes. And then they continue on, I guess. I kind of want that scene to come back and bite Fisk because of the fact it's like, look, the reason the red tape is there is safety. And Fisk bypassed all that. So I would like to see that come back and maybe actually cause a problem. But who knows? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's gonna happen. Maybe not. Also, Kristen and Cherry are not happy about Matt taking Hector as a client. Because, you know, Matt's basically going up against the whole of the NYPD. That's basically the way that it looks. Because of the lack of evidence for corrupt cops. And then Matt's like, look, we're gonna do this. Just back me. And they agree. And also, he's like, Cherry, I need you to find a witness. And also, I need you to find out stuff about Hector. Because even though I believe that he's innocent, he's still hiding something. And I want to know what he's hiding. So we get to the courthouse for like the prequel to what will happen in the next episode, which is the court case. And we meet the rival lawyer Galloway himself from Transformers Revenge of the Fallen makes another appearance. Yes, indeed. It is the actor from Transformers Revenge of the Fallen who basically wanted Optimus Prime off the planet. You remember that scene? I don't know if you do, but that guy, the actor, is here as a rival lawyer. But I love that because of the fact that it's like, when I heard his voice, I was like, it's you! You're the guy who talked to Optimus Prime in a very bad way. You basically bullied Optimus Prime. I don't like you. Because what if we leave and you're wrong? And the prequel is basically about the fact that there's gonna be no bail. Like, you can't post bail. Simple as that. Because he did kill a cop, okay? So he's gonna stay in prison where he's probably gonna get beaten up by both cops and inmates. Meanwhile, BB goes to visit Fisk and he mentions Ben, which was a very tense scene, especially because now it's connected. By the way, this episode is the first episode of this series where we are now in the original series, where it was kind of planned as a reboot, but I don't know if it fully was, with some additional scenes that I will talk about later on. But we got the Ben mention and I was like, how dare you talk to him after you killed him in his house? So later that day, we have Heather, who is at a book signing because apparently she released a book. And then we have a weird guy who appears and he's like, can I get some therapy from you? And she's like, yeah, sure. And everyone online is like, that's Muse. It's like, all right, cool. Apparently that's Muse. And then also one of Fisk's guys is there as well. We'll get back to that later. So the next day, Fisk goes over to a burial for a cop. And then Fisk tries to ask the commissioner for help. Commissioner's like, once a thug, always a thug. No. So that didn't really go all that well. Meanwhile, Cherry and Kristen head over to Hector's wife. And this scene is a little bit weird because Cherry is like, we're here to pick up his suit. And then she's like, oh yeah, hey, I left it on the bed. Cherry goes in there for a good like 10 minutes and is like, that's not suspicious to anyone else? Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just me who thinks this is kind of suspicious. But it's a bit suspicious, isn't it? But there, Cherry learns that Hector is actually White Tiger. So he calls Matt, who is on a date with Heather, and gets interrupted and then learns the truth and later on confronts Hector about it. And we also learn then that yes, Hector is getting beaten up in prison. Meanwhile, Fisk threatens the commissioner in the most Fisk way possible because he's just eating a sandwich and he's talking to the commissioner. The commissioner walks in, resigns, but then he talks about sandwiches and delicious sandwiches, and then he has a sandwich in front of him. He lifts up the piece of paper, the wrapping paper, and there is a picture of the commissioner's son that the commissioner was trying to hide. And it's like, that is such a Fisk thing to do, because any other politician might have been like, I will hurt your family. Fisk is like, I'm gonna hurt your son that you don't even know that I know about. Okay? I'm gonna take it a step further. So the commissioner doesn't resign. So that's gonna be fun, but it's such a Fisk way. And then afterwards, he's like, this sandwich is trash. Disgusting sandwich. So at the courthouse, Matt tries to keep the White Tiger a secret. And the fact that, you know, maybe the jury's opinion will be swayed because of the White Tiger. they should not mention the white tiger. And Galloway, which one I'm gonna call him, he is against it, but the judge eventually is like, alright, fine. We will not mention the white tiger. This is gonna come back to bite Matt in a way that you wouldn't expect, because I didn't expect. So afterwards, Matt is outside of a church and he's listening in, but he can't enter. Potentially because of what happened to Foggy, but what I like to see, the way that I see it, is the fact of what happened to Lantham, because of the fact that he died. That's how I like to see it, but to each their own, you know. But he listens in, but he can't really get himself to enter the church. So Matt decides to follow the corrupt cop, and Heather cancels on Matt because of the fact that she's gonna see a new client, and that client turns out to be Fisk, and he's there with his wife in order to, you know, fix their marriage problems. And the marriage problems are basically like, look, man, you left me, alright? After you got shot, you just left. You abandoned me, basically. And Fisk is like, look, I was assaulted by a vigilante. I got shot. I took some time. It was for the best. And I love the fact that they reference Hawkeye and Echo in this series without fully going into it, because the vigilante that assaulted him was Kate Bishop, if you remember in the final episode of Hawkeye. And then Maya shot him in the head, and Echo happened. So I like how they reference that, but keep it on the down low. So after a while, Matt finally learns the witness's location. He calls Cherry to about the location, and he goes there. He gets upstairs. He knocks on the door. The dude lets him in. He's like, oh, look, my name is Nikki. He's like, all right, look, Nikki, you need to get out. You need to leave right now, all right? Because there are cops coming here to kill you. Corrupt cops are coming here to kill you. And initially, he doesn't believe until the knock happens, and then he leaves, and then Matt stays behind. He opens the door, and then they're like, where is he? And he's like, well, sorry, officer, I didn't see where he went. So then the corrupt cops start beating up Matt, and Matt's like, you don't want to do this. Don't do this. And then the corrupt cop pulls out a gun, and then Matt's just like, you don't want to do this. And the way that it seems on the outside is the fact that he's talking to them. He's not. He's talking to himself. He's talking to Daredevil. He's like, Daredevil, you don't want to come out, okay? We made a deal. You're not coming out, okay? But once the gun gets ready to shoot, Daredevil comes out, and Matt starts beating the both of them up, breaks one's hand in a violent way. Very entertaining. That blood, I think, was CGI, but whatever. You know, you can't really break someone's arm that way IRL, so good to go. But he beats them up, and then Matt screams. Episode 3, which I will say I was terrified of, entirely because of the fact that the MCU has not handled courtroom scenes with any sort of respect at all. She-Hulk. Like, that is literally what made me scared of this episode. Like, when the last episode ended, I was like, oh no, next week might not be good, because courtroom scenes in the MCU haven't necessarily been good, but I can guarantee you that this one is. So let's get into the episode. So it starts off with Matt and Hector sitting next to each other, and Hector tells the story of his home and a cookie frog, which I think is the funniest name ever. He even imitates the sound. We'll get back to that later on. But it was a nice story about his hometown. Meanwhile, at night, there is a robbery at Red Hook, which Vanessa's like, look, Fisk, the kids are fighting. And Fisk is like, let them kill each other. I don't care. It is kind of funny because the parents are gone, so the children are misbehaving. Because that's basically what Vanessa says. Vanessa's like, without you or me at the helm, the families are running amok. So in my head, I'm like, the kids are misbehaving. So at the courtroom, Matt is washing his hands from the fight that happened in the last episode. Which, by the way, why was the song at the end of that episode that song? It was so abrupt. The way that the last episode ended, it's just like, why did it end with Get Free? It's like Matt's just beating up some people, letting the devil of Hell's Kitchen out again. And then he screams, and then we get like, get free! It was funny, abrupt. I don't really care, but it's just so weird. But then a cop appears inside of the restroom and immediately targets Matt. Matt's like, where are you? Who are you? And it's like, oh, wait, you're the guy that I beat up. So then the cop threatens Matt with obstruction of justice. Meanwhile, Matt's like, yeah, what about your witness stuff, huh? That wasn't cool either. Also, we have Cherry, who is taking care of Nikki, and they need to get him to the courtroom, which I will immediately talk about right now, because later on the cops are like, Nikki cannot come here. Yes, we need to get him here in one piece. So how are we gonna do it? Well, Cherry gets into a truck, and he drives over towards the courthouse. And he gets stopped by cops. Turns out Nikki ain't in the back. They took a taxi instead. Brilliant way to do a decoy. So we get the actual trial started with the first person called to the stage, which is the corrupt cop, who immediately starts to lie about everything that went down, so that's fun. But then it's Matt's turn to question him, and Matt's like, I heard you got a black eye. You know what they say about black eyes in the world of boxing? They say you should have some fast hands, which is like, Matt, I love Matt. I love Matt Murdock in the courtroom, dude. His sassiness in the courtroom is peak. I love that stuff. Immediately, I knew we were in safe hands with the courtroom stuff. However, Matt kind of picks apart the story that the corrupt cop said, because he was like, we were on patrol. We went down to the subway. No one was there. And Matt's like, no one was there. That's a bit strange. I mean, no one playing music. No people waiting for the train. Like, really? That's really suspicious. Very suspicious. But he can't really push further. So then they have to wait for the second person to be called to the stage, because Nikki isn't here yet. But Nikki arrives late, but still in time. So Nikki gets on stage and lies. He lies about everything, which completely blows, like, Matt's case out the water, because now he has nothing. Also, we have someone from Fisk's goes to the children in order to have them stop fighting. And then one child rebels again and is like, oh yeah, if Fisk wants to say something, he can come down here and say it himself. But that didn't really work out. So now we need a new way in order to win. So Hector gets called to the stage, and Matt is like, okay, so what were you doing there? And Hector basically says that he bought a building, and it was supposed to be a surprise for his wife. And then he heard screaming from the subway, went down there in order to help. And Matt is kind of leading, in a way, Hector along so that Matt can make his grand reveal, which I never expected. He pulls out of the back the White Tiger mask. He's like, is it true that you are White Tiger? And it's like, I never saw that coming. I was at my mom's place when I watched this episode. I was shocked. Shocked, I tell you. I was super shocked. I was like, what? Did he just pull out the White Tiger mask in the middle of the courtroom? When he explicitly asked the judge to ignore the White Tiger fact. Which, yeah, that immediately calls for, like, a break. And the judge isn't really happy about that stuff, because Matt was like, that's not. And then he does it himself. That's not cool. Also, Hector is like, look, man, that wasn't your secret to tell. And Matt's like, well, one thing's for sure. If we win this, you're never going to be able to be White Tiger again. Simple as that. And Hector's like, yeah, that's not going to be a possibility. You don't understand. White Tiger isn't just a costume, okay? It's who I am. Simple as that. It's destiny. Which, I love the way that this also then speaks about Matt, who has given up on being Daredevil. I really like that. But then, Matt kind of fights back with the fact that he's like, well, to be honest, once you've given up the White Tiger, you'll never miss him again. As in, Matt doesn't miss Daredevil, but he does. We all know he does. But now that the White Tiger secret is out, we get a bunch of people on the stand who basically are like, yeah, White Tiger saved me. Matt's team even pulls out, like, witness statements from the police themselves, who were helped by White Tiger. So we're on an upwards tick here. And then Hector once again gets called to the stand. And basically, Matt's like, why did you do it? And Hector's like, because it's the right thing to do about everything. Why do you help this person, that person, this person, that person? Because it's the right thing to do. I love this actor. I am so sad that he passed away. Because, to be honest, Marvel, if you wanted to make a show about White Tiger, I would have approved it 100% with this actor. I would have rather had that than like Echo or Agatha, which actually is a show that I enjoyed, but I would have rather had a White Tiger show than an Agatha show, let's be honest there. Or any of the other, like, useless shows that Marvel has made. This one could have actually been interesting, but sadly enough, the actor passed away, so we can't even get a prequel series because of the fact that, you know, what happens at the end of the episode, we'll get there when we get there. But basically, because of this, the closing statement kind of gets a bit muddied on the opposition side, on the dirty cop side, because it's like, look, we all do good things sometimes, but that doesn't exempt us from doing bad things. But that doesn't work because of the fact that we've won. Because afterwards, it is officially stated that Hector is free of all charges. Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. It's Johnny Depp all over again. But Fisk isn't really happy about this, and he calls BB over. And then he makes a statement about the fact that vigilantes are just, you know, awful. He doesn't like vigilantes, simple as that. I can understand why with Daredevil, and also, I don't know if you really want to count Punisher, but Kate Bishop, you know, kind of vigilantes getting in his way. I understand why. But then after that, we have the fact that Hector once again puts on the White Tiger outfit because he just can't stop. He goes outside, he hears a woman screaming, he tries to go over there, but then he gets shot in the head, and it's revealed that the person who shot him is the Punisher. Frank, how could you? But it's not him. He might have the skull logo on his chest, but there's no way Frank Castle would do something like that, okay? We all love Frank Castle. Alright, we know Frank Castle. He doesn't kill the innocent. That is the one thing he doesn't do, even though Billy tried to make Frank think that he killed innocent people. He did not, in fact, kill innocent people. It's not something that he does. It's another one of those corrupt cops who killed White Tiger. So let's get into that 4th episode of Daredevil Born Again. So in this episode, Matt gets called to the coroner's office because of the fact that, well, sadly enough, White Tiger has passed away because of the gunshot from the last episode. So Matt tries to figure out what happened, but it seems like the dude who works there just doesn't really care. He's like, well, to be honest, they didn't find a bullet casing, and I don't really care. But then Hector's niece walks in, and she initially kind of blames Matt because it's like, well, you got him out. A lot of good that did him. Which is like, don't you blame Matt. But she wants to see her uncle, and Matt's like, that's not gonna happen, come with me. And then she's like, alright, look, man, it's like, it's just so unfair, okay? I mean, Hector is just gonna be remembered as someone from, like, the Heights. Meanwhile, the cops are gonna be, like, propped up, and it's like, look, Hector was White Tiger, okay? He was more important than just some guy from the Heights. Also, we see Muse take a guy into the subway area, I guess. And also, this niece person in the comic books eventually becomes the next White Tiger. So maybe they're setting something up, maybe not. Let's just hope she doesn't get her own Disney Plus show before she can actually prove herself. We've seen what happened with those. Marvel, don't do it again, okay? We already had Echo. We're gonna get, like, Ironheart. Nobody wants those things. Maybe she could work in, like, a Young Avengers kind of thing. I was about to say Young Justice, but that was the wrong franchise. Meanwhile, Daniel is at the club, and he spills some stuff towards BB about Fisk's plan that will come back to bite later on. But we'll get there later on, but it has been mentioned. Also, a homeless man gets arrested for stealing cereal, and Kirsten gives Matt a case about that homeless guy. So that's gonna be fun for Matt. Meanwhile, in therapy with Fisk and Mrs. Fisk. Hey, you're Mrs. Fisk. We get to finally talk about Adam. And first of all, what drew Vanessa towards Adam was his hands. Which I was like, it's TMI. But no, she means painting-wise. And also, the reason that she did it is because of the fact that, well, Fisk left. And she did not know if Fisk would return. And then she thought about her mother, who, when her dad either passed away or left, I forgot which one it was, but either one of those two, her mom was completely broken, and she did not want to be that. And apparently, when a woman thinks about empowerment, it's always using her body. It's a weird thing, but yeah, she cheated, and I'm like, that's still not an okay reason to cheat, okay? No matter what, like, give it some time and then maybe, you know? But it also doesn't really seem like you really tried to put effort into getting Fisk back. Fisk just left, which makes him a prick, but we already knew that. We've seen the Netflix show. But it's like you also, it doesn't really seem like you tried to get him back. But whatever, cheating happened. However, Fisk promises that he did not kill Adam. He had a talk with him, a dialogue, and that's it. But that's not it. But we'll get there later on. So Matt goes to his case, which is of a Leroy Bradford guy. And apparently, he has a bit of a rap sheet. Not like serious crimes or anything, I don't think, but he has a rap sheet. And basically, they're all looking at like 30 days in jail. He doesn't want that. He wants probation. Matt is sick of this guy because he doesn't even show remorse. Like, the dialogue that they use, like, he says, I didn't do it. And then Matt's like, well, there's evidence, video evidence. The guy at the counter saw you do it. So, yeah. And then he's like, maybe it was a scroll, and I'm like, how dare you reference Marvel's worst project? The worst thing the MCU has ever released, and everyone might be thinking She-Hulk, but that's wrong. It's Secret Invasion. They are specifically referencing Secret Invasion here, because that is when the scrolls kind of became a bit more public knowledge. But don't you reference scrolls, okay? Don't do that. That project was awful. But no, it wasn't a scroll. Also, the dude's entirely disrespectful. He's like, I get the blind one. It's like, what are you? You get the best lawyer around, and you are complaining about that. I don't like this guy. But he also doesn't show any remorse, and he keeps hammering on about the fact that, you know, he wants probation, but he's not gonna get that. Matt even gets his sentence down from 30 to 10 days, which is a miracle, and he still won't take it. And he's like, look, man, I used to have food stamps after I had, like, after I did my criminal thing, and then I missed an appointment, and then they took that away. And it's like, and I'm just like, then you shouldn't have missed your appointment. In no way do you make it clear that missing the appointment was your fault. So I don't care if you missed your appointment. That is on you. And then you have consequences, okay? You should have just made the appointment. Simple as that. And that's basically it. We don't really get any resolution to that plotline, sadly enough. And also, while there, Matt confronts the dirty cop from before. Powell was his name. About killing White Tiger. And he's like, I didn't do it. And Matt listens to his heart, and turns out he is correct. So we are not one step closer. So out of this whole, like, Bradford stuff that I personally didn't really care about, at least we got this scene where it's like, okay, you know what? I like that scene. I also like Matt playing his way in order to get that sentence down. It's just like, it shows off how good of a lawyer Matt is, even though Bradford is just a prick. Matt is so good, and I just love seeing him work. I just wish he had a better case, that's all. Meanwhile, Fisk is at Red Hook with his team, and he talks about how he wants to rebuild the port in order to make Red Hook great again. The problem is, his assistant, I guess, or I don't know. I don't know what that woman is, but let me see here. Sheila points out that there are some rules that we have to follow, you know, bureaucracy and all that kind of stuff. And this really makes Fisk angry, because Fisk is used to the fact, like, okay, if I say something, it gets done. But now he has to deal with the red tape and all that stuff. And I just love to see him get angry about the fact that he has to, like, wait. And I can understand that feeling, because I'm also the kind of person who would like to get stuff done. But then, you know, it's like, you have to wait. It's like, why? Just get it done. But I love seeing that angry. And then later on, he goes to a school performance, a choir performance. However, then Blake finds in the BB report about Fisk's plan that he is being called a union buster or whatever it's called. So then Sheila's like, don't worry, I'll take care of it. You just be silent about this. However, later on, she tells Fisk about this, but she doesn't say that it was Daniel who was the problem. But Fisk is immediately like, call everyone. I will find out who did this. And he basically berates everyone until Daniel's like, sorry, boss, it was me. So Fisk is like, everyone out. And then Sheila's like, I'll stay here as well. It was also partially my fault. It's like, alright, fine. You can go down with that ship. And then Daniel just goes off, basically kissing Fisk's feet. And Fisk is like, mistakes were made. And I'm like, really? It was that easy? It was that easy to just get forgiven for almost ruining the whole mayor stuff that Fisk wants and his entire plan. I just thought that was funny, how easily he got out of it. But also Fisk recognizes the loyalty that Daniel has for him. And also the courage for stepping forward and admitting to his mistake instead of hiding like a coward. So he forgives Daniel. But don't let it happen again, because otherwise you will be meeting my friend Cardor. I did it to the Russians, I could do it to you as well. So at night, Matt decides to do a little bit of investigating of his own about how White Tiger died, and maybe he will be able to find the bullet casing. So Matt stands where White Tiger was shot, and he doesn't really notice anything until someone knocks away a coin on accident, just like kicks a coin away, and Matt's like, that's what could happen. So he finds a small bottle and he knocks it over, and the bottle rolls away and he finds the bullet casing. And I'm like, that is so perfect. I love seeing Matt do his thing. I love it. However, Matt notices something about that bullet casing and he decides to investigate further. I also loved how the sound changes when Matt finds the bullet casing and he feels and he notices something, and then the music, like the sound just starts to change immediately when he notices the important part. But after that, Matt goes to this abandoned area, gets into this building, goes down the elevator, and he finds some kind of a secret lair, and he's like, hello? And who gets it? Does he get attacked by? But Punisher! Frank Castle! Yes, he's in this episode. Fantastic! And Matt wants to know if Frank knows anything about the, Punisher logo. He's like, well, it's not mine. It's just a bunch of fanboys. What do you do about it, huh? However, the tone kind of starts to change a bit because of the fact that Matt is like, with all your skills, you could be of service. And Frank is like, Look, I was a servant. I served in the military. You put up on a Halloween costume, and he still calls him Red, which I love. He's like, you put on a Halloween costume, Red. I actually served in the military. Don't you talk to me about service, okay? You never served, so you have no right to talk about that. And then from there, it spirals into a therapy session about Foggy. Because Frank realizes, look, man, you are so guilty. You feel so much guilt. I know that because I feel it all the time. And he wants permission from Punisher to be Daredevil again, in a way. But Matt tries to deny it, but it doesn't work. And then Frank tries to get Matt to say the name Foggy. He even calls the one dude Bullseye. He's like, look, Bullseye got life. What did Foggy get, huh? But he's like, say his name, say his name. Matt can't do it. And eventually he punches Frank in the face. He says sorry. Frank's like, what are you saying sorry for? Come on, man. Be a man. But eventually he gets Foggy out of Matt. Matt actually says the name Foggy, which I think might actually be the first time he said it since basically Foggy died. So we have a little bit of a therapy session with the Punisher, and then Matt leaves. To anyone who's like, ah, don't worry, we'll see more of him. We've seen behind-the-scene pictures of Matt and Punisher, or Daredevil and Punisher, teaming up together. So we'll get more of him. But this scene, just like the scene in Season 2 on that rooftop, is absolutely brilliant. I love their interactions. Look, this episode wasn't really that good, in a way. It was a good episode, but it was the worst one so far, in my opinion, up to this point. But now we're getting to the interesting stuff. Frank and Matt interacting with each other is just absolutely perfect. But we'll see Punisher later on. Don't you worry about that one. I also like how the interaction starts where Matt's like, hey Frank, how you doing? And Frank is like, peachy. Also, to anyone who's like, okay, how did Matt find Frank? There are multiple things that could be it, okay? Number one, he used his senses to find Frank, which could be the truth, but who knows. But the other one that I've seen online is people say that Matt has been keeping tabs on Frank, and that's how he learned where he was. But in the interaction between Frank and Matt is always peak. Also on the whiteboard behind him, it does seem like Frank has been very busy taking out some targets. Maybe that stuff will lead into his special presentation that he is going to get, according to John Bernthal, which I am super excited about. And then to end the episode, we have some true natures coming back into action. Yes, indeed. Because even though Fisk tries to be the good guy, he has changed. He hasn't changed at all. Because turns out, this man has locked Adam up. And by the way, the wounds that we saw earlier were probably from beating up Adam. But he has locked Adam up. And he's just eating and drinking wine while Adam is in a cage. It's just such a, classic Fisk move. And also, Matt's true nature is coming out as well, because at night Matt sneaks away. He goes up high and we get to see a bunch of masks from Daredevil. He grabs the Daredevil weapon and starts training with it, as in the return of Daredevil's coming back. And then to fully end the episode, we have Muse, who took a guy to, I guess, his secret lair and is training him, which, okay, I don't know who Muse is. Apparently he's a newer villain. I don't really know anything about him, but I'm interested to see what's gonna happen. Episode 5 time. Apparently it is St. Patrick's Day, which means that this episode takes place in March. I mean, the season starts off after we get past the 1 year skip at the December of 2026, and then we move into the new year. How are we in March? This series, man, it takes a long how did we time skip all the way to March? But whatever, it is St. Patrick's Day, and Matt goes to the bank in order to ask for a loan, where he meets Miss Marvel's father, and they talk a little bit. Apparently Kamala's visiting some friends in California, which could be a reference to Young Avengers. See, Marvel, in order to do references, you don't really need 500 different rewrites. You could just do a simple scene like this. Everybody's happy. However, the loan gets rejected, so Matt, sadly enough, isn't happy. So Matt leaves the bank and he calls Kirsten, I think, but he basically says that yeah, the loan didn't happen. But also, while he is calling her, the Irish are gonna rob the bank, and I thought Punisher already took care of you back in Season 2 and early parts of Season 1 of the Punisher itself, but Season 2 of Daredevil, But they want to rob the bank for some special item that some boss wants. That boss, later on, we find out is Luca. One of the heads of like the 5 families, one of them people. But Matt hears this and he goes back into the bank whistling because he's blind. It works perfectly. However, he then gets taken as a hostage and we basically have a bit of a tension sequence with the bank and then eventually with the cops as well. SWAT arrives and the leader of this ragtag group calls the cops and they have some fun interactions with each other, as in tell me a joke and stuff like that. However, the woman, I forgot her name, but the woman wants a show of good faith. Release some hostages. So the ones that get chosen are a woman and Matt. But Matt doesn't really want to go because also the bank manager isn't here. So Kamala Khan's father, Yusuf, he is supposed to be taken, but he doesn't know the combination. So Matt kind of has to save his life. So Matt's like, I'm gonna stay. Take the husband, because the woman is like, we just got married, okay? Please just let my husband come with me. It's like, Matt's like, look, just take the husband, okay? And then he tells a bit of a backstory on himself where he was like, yeah, look, Murdoch is apparently kind of an Irish last name, and also he was an orphan. But please take the husband, leave Murdoch in here. So eventually they agree, they let him out, and then afterwards Murdoch is like, sir, can I need to go. It's like, well, you had your chance. No. I need to go to the bathroom. I need to take a piss. Simple as that. So, one of the baddies goes with Matt. Also, Yusuf was taken down to the basement by the blue masked one. But Matt takes out his person and then goes down and takes out the blue person as well. I think the red one is actually the one that Matt took out, but the blue one he also takes out. And then he does an Irish accent, which I never expected, but I love to see. And also we get the line that he is a really good lawyer, and it's like, Spider-Man reference. Because that was in Spider-Man No Way Home. So Matt opens up the vault because he is Daredevil after all. But they need to find out what the baddies were after because they can't go back upstairs empty-handed, otherwise people are gonna die. But there's only one key, so Matt searches the blue guy and he apparently has a second key. So now they start going through boxes, but at least there is a 4 on the key, so we know there's a 4 in there. So we try all the 4s. He keeps dropping the key. Also, we have a little bit of an after edit where Matt mentions his mother, because he's like, yeah, my father died when I was young, and I never knew my mother. And then it looks like we got another post edit where he's like, until much later in life, which is a reference to season 3, but because of the fact that in the original show there was no season 3, it's kind of like the last episode where we had like Punisher say bullseye, which was also after and was not part of that scene. You can hear it. But eventually we find the box, and it was 407, and inside is a special stone. What's the purpose of the stone? Who knows? So they go upstairs, the cops are ready to bust in, and Matt basically is like, look, okay, you can stop all this stuff because the cops are about to bust in, okay? And then they want to shoot, but then Matt's like, I got your special stone, here, catch. And the cops break in, and the leader of the group decides to blend in with the cops, and apparently a woman who earlier told Matt to sit down was working with them, and she needs to take the stone to Luca. So the leader blends in with the cops, he escapes, Matt goes after him, beats him up, breaks his leg, and also apparently he switched the jewel for some candy. And then at the end of the episode, Yusuf offers Matt some help in order to be able to make his business a bit more profitable, because Matt only really helps those in need, but that doesn't really bring in the big bucks and does not allow them to get loans. So maybe one day Matt is gonna go with Yusuf to Jersey City in order to meet Kamala Khan and also get some advice. So then, episode 6. Oh, what an episode, boys! When I first said that it was gonna be Daredevil versus Muse, I did not know that this episode was gonna be so good. So let's get into it, because this episode is the Muse episode. So this episode starts off with the body that Muse took earlier and is finally found, and also we got some graffiti that needs to be cleaned up. Also, what we learn in this episode is the fact that I didn't know what Muse was doing to that guy. Turns out he was draining his blood. But we'll get into that later on. Anyway, we see Matt pray, which is brilliant, because I love the fact that Matt is still doing that. He's kind of given up religion, but not fully, and I like that. I think that is perfect for his character right now. And also, Heather is apparently writing a book on vigilantes, and is like, hey, Matt, you represented some vigilantes. And I'm like, yeah, Punisher, Spider-Man, yeah. Good times, good times, good times. And even White Tiger in this show, but good times. And then she's like, can you set me up with, like, Frank Castle? And it's like, really? That's the person you pick. You pick the Punisher. Of all the vigilantes that exist, you pick the Punisher. The one that actually kills people. Yeah, okay. Sure, we have a plethora of vigilantes to choose from. You could even pick Jessica Jones or Luke Cage. But no, you had to pick the one that actually kills. Sure, why not? And then later on, she's like, Daredevil's like, oh, if only you knew. But Matt's like, I don't know, maybe. So then the mayor gets a visit from the cleaner, and that is where we learn the official stuff. And that is Muse, apparently, takes the blood from his victims, puts that into his paint, and then paints with it. And apparently, he's had over 60 victims. I mean, we learned that later on, but still, over 60 victims. Are you kidding me? How did the cops not know that this was happening? But this is gonna play into the whole Daredevil Born Again part. So, back at the office, Matt gets a visit from Angela, who's like, you know what? My uncle was kind of like investigating something. People go missing, that kind of stuff, you know? And it seems to be happening around like track 61. And then Matt's like, what do you want me to do? And it's like, well, help. And I'm like, how do you want him to help? Like, seriously, the dude is technically blind. How do you want him to help? What do you want him to do? Technically, you're supposed to go with this to the cops, but seems like the cops have become a little bit more corrupt since we last saw Daredevil. So, that might not be an option, but still, what do you want Matt to do? But then she implies that she's gonna do this herself, and it's like, oh boy. That's not gonna be good. So then Fisk has a meeting with basically the cops in that sense. The cop bosses, I guess. And it's like, they basically want to go fully after Muse. And Fisk is like, no. Because if we go after him right now, he'll go underground and come back stronger than ever. And I'm like, you speaking from experience, big boy? So we have to keep this a secret when we go after him. So then at night, there are girls who are walking away from, I don't know, the bar, I guess. And they see someone painting and it's like, oh my god, are you Muse? And then it's like, well, you become the next victims, I guess. Because Muse then starts painting with their blood as well. So while that is happening, Fisk is asking for money at a fundraiser. And they all say no. We even get a return of the swordsman, which we saw earlier in this episode during the BB report. But I ignored those kind of things. But it was nice to see him again. Another connectivity thing with the MCU. Love to see it. There was no need for him to be in this episode, but they put him in this episode, which was nice. But it goes horribly wrong. Also, Fisk has become a bit bigger because his suits aren't fitting anymore. And also, Cherry visits Matt and basically tells him to stay out of the Muse case, which I don't really know if Matt was really gonna investigate, but after the bank stuff, who knows? You know, the devil is coming back because his work is never done, you know? So then Fisk gets called away because of what Muse did, which has been found. And basically, in a way, he's making a mockery of the cops. So the next day, Fisk invites the chief of the police and is like, all right, look, we need more cops on the streets. Like, well, you cut every funding that we have. It's like, oh, don't worry about it. I've selected some special people for my own vigilante task force. It's like, oh, so you're just taking the corrupt cops. Because initially, when word came out that, you know, Daredevil was gonna fight against cops, I was a little bit hesitant. But now that we know that they are the corrupt cops, I'm all for it. Because, yeah, nobody likes those people. Not all cops are corrupt, but the corrupt cops deserve everything bad that happens to them. Simple as that. And also, they are gonna get overtime and they won't have body cams. And I'm like, oh no. No, you're not doing that, are you? Because that is gonna lead to even more corruption. At least with body cam footage, we have proof of their corruption. Not now, it is gonna be horrible. But apparently that might be more of a next season thing, if rumors are to believe. To be believed. So Angela went down into the subway and gets kidnapped by Muse. So Matt gets a call from her aunt and he then decides to call the cops, but then he's like, F it. He actually says F it. Goes up to the roof, grabs his suit, puts it on, and swings around the city as Daredevil because he's back, baby! I know people are mad that it took us so long to get Daredevil again. I don't care. I've loved what happened before. I love the build-up towards Daredevil, and this moment is so satisfying. But that is not the only one who is born again, because even though Fisk tried to hide it, he's still Kingpin through and through. So he basically goes down to Adam with an axe, opens the door, throws him the axe because Fisk is like, you deserve a fair fight to fight me. And Matt goes down into the subway, gets to track 61, and Muse looks outside and he sees Daredevil coming. Like, if you see that coming towards you, run. Simple as that. So Daredevil starts beating up Muse, and I love the creepiness that they have with Muse. And Fisk fights against Adam and beats him up a lot. And the Daredevil versus Muse fight is really good. We got a wee bit of CGI here and there, but overall, the fight is really good. It's just like a backflip here and there that just gets like, that's like CGI. But outside of that, we have like basically practical fights, and I love the fighting. But Matt gets hit as well because of the fact that he's distracted by Angela. He wants to help her, but then Muse sneaks up on him, which you might be like, oh, how is that possible? Well, distractions, obviously. But Matt eventually beats him, kind of chokes him out, but doesn't kill him, and then goes over to Angela and brings her back to life in that sense. Also takes the thing out. By the way, what was the stuff that Muse injected into her? Was that like paint, or was that something to like purify the blood or whatever? Because if that was like paint or something paint related, I think she needs to go to the hospital, because that is not a good thing. But because of the fact that Daredevil saved Angela, Muse has escaped, so he will be back either this season or the next, who's to say. We still have another 3 episodes to deal with, so we could still see him. And then to end the episode, Matt is like, I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. As in Daredevil's back, because she's like, Daredevil. It's like, yeah, I'm here. I'm here. Okay, yes. Daredevil has returned. Episode 7. So this episode starts off with Fisk asking his men, Buck and Daniel, when they look outside, what do they see? And I was like, buildings. And then Daniel's like, Starbucks, and I couldn't help but laugh. But then, you know, Buck is like, voters. And then after that, Fisk learns about the fact that Daredevil has returned, and he is not happy about that at all. He ain't happy about that, okay? Meanwhile, with Matt, who is under the shower, Heather notices some bruises on him, and instead of explaining, he's like, let's just do each other. And that works until afterwards, because afterwards he still kind of needs to explain the bruises, because it didn't fully go away. So Matt basically has a speech about the fact that he's not happy with his life right now, and that he liked his old life basically better. And the way that he talks about it, it kind of feels like, in a way, it's talking about Netflix versus MCU. Like, now that he is in the MCU, everything looks fancy, but he still liked his old life over on Netflix a little bit better. But he's basically talking about Daredevil. Heather doesn't figure that out. She just thinks about the old office and Foggy and Karen. But I like that speech a lot. I love it when Matt opens up about, you know, Daredevil and stuff like that. So after that, at his office, Jerry immediately comes down his throat about the fact that he's Daredevil again. And Matt's like, look, man, back in the day, you used to call me for stuff like this. Also, I got Muse in the night. The cops were just twiddling their thumbs, okay? I have to do this. I had to stop him. And then Jerry's like, fine, I won't help you anymore if you're gonna keep being Daredevil. And I'm like, dude, I could handle this from Foggy, because Foggy's awesome. But you're not Foggy. Don't pretend to be, okay? Don't do this. Don't. So then we cut back to Fisk, and he's like, well, you know, he starts once again complaining about the fact that Daredevil's back. And we get a little bit of a nod to season 1 of Daredevil, but also, weirdly enough, this was part of the old stuff, I think. This whole episode was before the overhaul. By the way, this is also the last episode before the overhaul, so there's good stuff coming. There's a lot of good stuff coming. But basically, Fisk explains that he took 10 years of his life to work and build up a business, the criminal enterprise that he had in season 1 of Daredevil. And then Daredevil came in like a week. He just took care of all of it, which I thought was funny, but also a little bit weird because of the fact that it's like, but this was before the overhaul, so what were they referencing originally? Is that some off-screen stuff that happened or what? Doesn't matter. But anyway, in the hospital, Angela doesn't really have a lot of information for Matt. However, Muse did have sketches, so Matt knows that he needs to go back to that hideout. Maybe the sketches will lead to his next target. And then we have Luca, who meets up with Vanessa and calls her a better boss, which I don't even know if he's truthful about that. I mean, Luca hates the way that everything is being run right now because of the whole mayor stuff. But I think he's maybe like trying to get into her good graces by propping her up and telling her that she's a better boss. Because, like, look, I will say this. Vanessa is a better criminal boss than Fisk is right now. But I feel like before Fisk became mayor, Fisk was better than Vanessa. But Fisk has lost that because he focuses on his mayor stuff. But doesn't matter. He proposes that it is time for a change. We'll get back to that at the end of the episode. So then we have Muse, who visits Heather, and we learn his full name because the cop woman is at Fisk's place basically explaining about him, and apparently his name is Bastian Cooper. And they figured that out because of the clothing, because that was made from a special fabric, and they asked around, and apparently 12 people bought it. They went to 11 people, they can't find Bastian, so that must be the target, because the other ones were innocent. So now we have a little bit of backstory time, and it turns out that Muse was kind of a troubled individual, and also, I guess, had rich parents because of the fact that he was in involuntary commitment throughout his life. But his parents hired the best taekwondo instructor that they could for their son, which makes me go, okay, so you're from a rich family. Cool. However, Muse didn't really want to do any of that stuff. He just wanted to paint. He wanted to be an artiste. But he was forced to be in taekwondo until eventually he killed his own coach, which has never been proven. But let's be honest here. He killed his coach. Might have been his first kill. But that's basically the backstory. His parents, quote-unquote, didn't really love him, even though they probably did, but still, we don't know. We don't get flashbacks or anything. But his parents didn't necessarily love him. They just wanted him to be what they wanted him to be instead of letting him be an artist, and that basically made him snap. That's the way that I see his backstory play out, and I'm like, alright, cool, whatever. And also, Heather is the key, because basically, Heather is his muse or something like that. I don't know. I kind of just didn't necessarily understand what he meant by this, but let's just say she's important. However, throughout this, Heather has now figured out that this guy is dangerous. I don't know if she knows that this guy is Muse, but he is dangerous, that's for sure. So, he knocks Heather out, and then we cut to the hideout, where the cops are searching, and then they leave, and then Daredevil pops in, and he starts to search around through the sketches. And he feels one, and it's like, oh my god, it's Heather. And at that moment, when Matt is distracted, a cop appears. So Matt just throws his sticks at him, and then escapes. But now everyone knows that the target is Heather. And Muse has not kidnapped Heather, because he is planning on a murder. I can't say the other word, but he's basically gonna murder Heather and then himself. So he cuts Heather's arm and blood starts to pour out a bit. However, at that point the cops arrive and he's like, no, not yet. But when he wants to continue on with Heather, after Heather calls him a coward for wearing a mask, and I'm like, you're going a little bit too far right now, okay? You're calling him a coward for wearing a mask, but like Spider-Man and Daredevil wear masks too. Same with White Tiger. You call them cowards as well? Come on, he's a coward because he's a criminal. Simple as that. But before Muse can do anything more to Heather, Daredevil shows up, and yeah, this is definitely part of the old regime. Let's be honest here, this was part of the old stuff, because this fight is infinitely worse than what we got at the end of last episode. Because at the end of last episode, we got the new people who did the fight scene. Apparently, they reshot the whole fight scene in order to make it better. This episode, they did not, so every single move that gets performed has a cut after it. Matt lifts up his arms and blocks an attack. Then we cut to Matt counterattacking. It's like, there's too many cuts here. I mean, I can handle it, but it just feels weird after the last episode had such good fighting. And now this is just like the old people. I'm so happy that they are gone. Yes, they did the White Tiger stuff really well, but outside of that, leave please, let the new people come in. Because also, the new people have hired, like, some people from Netflix, like the fighting people from Netflix, in order to be able to make the fight better in the last episode. So, I'm excited for season 2, and for the next 2 episodes. But the fight goes into Matt's favor. However, Muse does pose a challenge, until Muse decides to go after Heather, and Matt shoots his grappling hook straight through Muse's shoulder, pulls him towards him and starts beating him up. And just as Matt is about to win, Heather shoots him dead. Woman, we were winning. There was no need. But whatever, Muse is now dead. He lands on the, because he put out like a giant sheet, and he lands on that sheet. And afterwards, Matt goes to check up on Heather, says her name, and apparently he took care of her, made sure to stop the wrist from bleeding, and then escape before the cops could come in. And afterwards, Fisk comes in and he's like, yeah, Daredevil was never here. It was my task force who did it. Because just like any other politician would, we're gonna use this situation to prop ourselves up. And he does. He actually does, by having his task force take the credit for taking down Muse, which is a classic thing to do. And then after that, Daniel also threatens BB because he's not happy about the last time she published one of the stories. So now she owes him, and she has to change the storyline from Daredevil beat Muse to Task Force beat Muse. And then she's like, are you threatening me? And he's like, no, but yeah. And then to end the episode, Vanessa sends a message to Luca about the fact that Fisk is alone. So he goes in there to kill Fisk. However, then Buck shoots Luca and saves Fisk. And, you know, it was apparently all a setup to kill Luca, because sometimes an example must be made. We have episode 8! So in this episode, Bullseye gets transferred from protective custody into the general population. We'll get back to that later on as to why this happened. But just so you know, it's all part of the plan. And if the plan goes the way that it's supposed to go, we won't be seeing Bullseye anymore. So Fisk takes Vanessa to Adam, and he confronts her about it, basically being like, look, you are my everything, and without you, I am nothing. And so Vanessa does the unexpected, and she just shoots Adam. And it's like, oh my god, what? Also, forgot to say this, out with the old, in with the new, because this is the first episode where the new people are in charge and the old people are gone. And the up in quality is already noticeable. From the moment that the episode starts off with the blue for Bullseye. Look, it still has the same, like, you know, like, look that all of the MCU, since, like, Phase 3 has had. But, like, they try with the coloration, with the blue around Bullseye. I love that. But Vanessa shoots Adam, and basically that is the end of therapy right there. Now Vanessa and Fisk are back together. Meanwhile, while this is happening, Heather thinks that Daredevil and Muse are kind of in the same boat. And Matt's like, well, I mean, one was there to save you, one wasn't. And then she's like, I saved me. It's like, oh, you're gonna be one of those people, aren't you? You're gonna be one of them. Cool. But she now kind of starts to go more on Fisk's side about the whole, you know, anti-vigilante task force. And Matt's like, look, Fisk is horrible. Simple as that. And then they get an invitation for the gala that Fisk is holding. And Matt's like, so you've been taking care of Fisk. Look, alright, he's dangerous. He wants you to get to me, okay? That's basically the whole plot between Heather and Matt throughout this episode. It's basically Matt being like, you are a target because of me. He wants me. He aims his sights at you to get to me. That's it. And as she being like, oh, but you're not making any sense, Matthew. Obviously, he's not making sense to her, but to us, he is making sense, and we all know. Also, to the gala, she can bring a guest, so maybe Matthew will join her at the gala after all, because she's still gonna go. But he has to go to Kirsten because she has something important, an important case, apparently. That case is not very important, but we'll get back to that later, because first, she tells him that Bullseye has been moved, and apparently it was on the orders of Fisk. Fisk moved Bullseye, and you can basically see the rest, right? Because, you know, he moved him in order to kill him, for those who don't understand. And also, Bullseye wants to talk to Matt, so that's gonna be interesting. But Matt now is a bit on edge, so when the client is there, he starts to talk about the fact, you know, that he's innocent and all that stuff, but then he starts to lie about something, and Matt just snaps. Then Matt just goes off on this guy for lying, and then he just leaves, and it's like, that is perfect. I love that scene so much, with the fact that, you know, Matt just goes off on him. But then Kirsten follows him, and then Matt basically explains this season, because they don't fully succeed, but they try to make everything in this season, you know, the whole disconnected puzzle mess. They try to kind of connect the pieces of the puzzle. They don't do it fully. They do need some glue in order to keep the whole thing together. So not all the pieces really work, but it's basically like, you know how we had the White Tiger storyline, the Muse storyline, the Task Force storyline, kind of like we had like so many different pieces. Yeah, it was all connected under the fact that it was like basically Matt's return as Daredevil and him kind of losing faith in the law in that sense. Because he's like, look, we tried to protect Hector, and he got killed, okay? And then Muse happened. And then also the task force killed Muse, and they are assaulting people on the streets. And, you know, it just doesn't work, okay? What we are just doing here is useless. And then we got someone sitting right there, just lying about stealing from teachers. I'm done with this. And then he just storms off. And where does he go? But the man goes back to continuity. To Josie's bar. He's standing outside, and Josie opens the door. It's like, hey, you want to come inside? So he goes inside, and then Cherry also joins in as well. He kind of starts to berate Matt for, you know, being Daredevil again, and also picking... I do like the line about picking the worst time, because, like, yeah, he did pick the worst time to return as Daredevil, looking at the fact that, well, now we have the task force around. But then Josie comes back from the back, and she has a bottle with her of, like, I don't know, I guess expensive alcohol. And she's like, let's pour this drink for Foggy. because this was the last drink that he ordered. And Matt's like, well, no, he didn't. But it's like, yes, he did. And then Matt realizes, he kind of starts to put the pieces together. And that is the fact that Bullseye was not killing Foggy because of the fact that he wanted revenge. This was targeted because Foggy had a case that was talked about in the first episode that he was going to win. Foggy had the case. It was done deal. Foggy was celebrating early, and then Bullseye killed him so that the case would just not go through. So there was a targeted attack. So Matt then leaves, and then Josie's like, he didn't use his cane. Cherry's like, I didn't notice. So he goes over to Bullseye and talks to and asks him about the fact, like, you were hired by Fisk, right? Why would you work for Fisk? And Bullseye doesn't really give him any answers that he needs, outside of the fact that basically confirming, yeah, apparently it was Fisk, which I know people are gonna have issues with. I'll wait until the next episode to see how this happens, because if he was actually working for Fisk, that would be terrible. Looking at the fact of Season 3, there's no way he would work with Fisk. However, it could be something like he was working for someone who was working for Fisk, but Bullseye didn't know that that guy was working for Fisk. So when he got the orders to kill Foggy, he didn't know that those orders came from, like, high up. In that sense, that is something that they could do. Kind of like put a middleman in between. And then he only figured out that it was Fisk a little too late, maybe in prison. But Bullseye then says an interesting line about, like, if, you know, in another universe, you would have actually helped me because of the fact that you have to defend even the worst enemy. Or something like that. I forgot the quote, but it was a really good quote. I recommend you look up that quote. But that was a really good quote, which will also be something to do with the end of this episode. But then Matt just starts to beat him up, smash his head on the table, and then calls the guards like, he went insane. He just smashed his head. Because I can't do that. I'm blind. Also, I don't know if Bullseye knows that Matt is Daredevil or not. But also, Bullseye, you are not Matt's main enemy, okay? You're not the #1 enemy for Daredevil. That's Kingpin. I don't care what you say. You will always be second to Fisk. So then we have the gala begins. We get to see all the players that we have around here. I'm not really gonna fully cover the gala. I'm just gonna talk about the interesting bits in the gala. But we get to see all of the players. Even Swordsman is here. All the players are here. And then we cut back to Bullseye, who apparently Matt knocked out his teeth when he smashed them on the table. So Bullseye uses that tooth as a weapon and escapes, which is like, okay, I get that early escape part. But then he's just wearing like a police uniform with like a hat on. It's like, oh yeah, nobody knows that it's Bullseye. No, how is he able to escape so easily? Because obviously, this was an actual escape, not a planned escape by Fisk or something like that. So Bullseye escapes, he's gone. So Heather is sad at the party that Matt isn't there, but then Matt arrives and he's beelining it for Fisk. He is ready to take on Fisk, at least maybe with words. I don't know if he's gonna punch him. But then Heather gets in the way, and they have a little bit of a talk, you know, the extended version of what we had at the apartment about the fact that it's like, Fisk is after me and uses you to do that stuff, that kind of stuff. So they kind of just talk about that. She doesn't understand anything about it, understandable. But then Fisk takes the swordsman with him and is like, look, I need money for the Red Hook pier. Give me your money. And then he's like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that. And then Fisk is like, I know you're the swordsman and I can easily send my task force after you. No matter how you look at it, at least it's gonna be worth looking into. Even if, you know, you're not the one, I could still send my task force and they could still beat you up in that sense and destroy your property through the search because of the police violence that they are doing. So then I guess Swordsman's like, okay, fine, I'll help you with the pier. And then when Fisk is done with that, reporter apparently takes a picture of it and tries to escape, but then Fisk sends his task force after him, and then the main task force guy takes his stuff, and is ready to burn his hand in like oil. And then the commissioner is like, hey, you stop. And it's like, I haven't used police brutality. And then he puts his hand in the oil and is like, well, now I have. Also, you're not my boss. Fisk is my boss. So you gotta take it up with him. See ya. So he leaves, basically officially confirming that the commissioner is absolutely useless in this season. Like, he has lost all of the power that he once had. So as he goes out, BB notices him, she's also here, and goes over to talk to him. And then we get the epic reveal that to BB that Fisk had something to do with her uncle's murder. And then she's like, oh yeah, I knew. That's why I have been around Fisk for so long. I'm trying to take the fat, bald idiot down. So now it seems like she's gonna work with the commissioner in order to take down Fisk. So when Matt finally has an opening to go to Fisk, Vanessa notices it and I guess turns on the light, or the spotlight turns on, and she then asks Fisk for a dance. So when they are dancing, everything seems to be fine. Fisk silently, but Matt can hear it. Fisk is like, "What are you doing here, devil? Don't you know that this could cause trouble? And also, I know you're back as the devil. I will maybe take you down for that." I don't know, he kind of threatens him a little bit. But then Buck tells Fisk, Bullseye escaped. He isn't dead like we all thought he was. So then Vanessa starts to become a bit panicky and lets it slip like, Fisk, I need to tell you something. And then Matt's like, "It was her. It wasn't Fisk. It was Mrs. Fisk. It was the woman Fisk." So then he takes Vanessa away from Fisk, which, by the way, the face that Fisk has in that scene when Matt takes Vanessa, he's just like, "What the hell is this?" But Matt then tries to get the information out of Vanessa, like, why? And she's like, does Heather know that you are Daredevil? And Fisk also kind of tries to lean into that, being like, "Why do you think Matt's so focused on vigilantes? Why do you think that is?" And it looks like they're about to spill. Also, Bullseye has arrived. He's climbed to a vantage point and he's ready to shoot Fisk. And I thought Matt was gonna jump in front of Fisk because that was already confirmed, by the way, through season 2, because that was like a couple of weeks ago. There was like behind the scenes of like season 2, and it was like a flyer, and on it was like Matt took a bullet for Fisk. So I knew that this moment was happening, but I thought he was gonna take the bullet for Fisk because of the fact that Fisk was about to out him as Daredevil to Heather. But no, I don't even think he noticed that because he was too focused on Vanessa. But he hears it. We got the really cool camera angle again, and then Matt jumps in front of the bullet and takes one in the shoulder. And that scene of Fisk holding Matt is just such a beautiful scene. I wish I could have used it for the thumbnail, but I couldn't find an image of it when I made the thumbnail, so, well, sadly enough, it's not gonna be possible. But Fisk then drops Matt. Matt falls to the floor, is bleeding. Heather is like, "No, my Matthew!" And that's how the episode ends, and then we get a bunch of red around Matt. Let's get into that finale, shall we? So, in this episode, we start off with going 1 year back, and Fisk was apparently acquitted of all charges because of the FBI corruption and Nadeem. Very nice that they name-dropped Nadeem. But because of all that stuff, because of the fact that muddied the water, that allowed Fisk to go free. But it did not really work for Bullseye. So Vanessa proposes that it will also work for Bullseye if he goes and kills Foggy and that client guy. If he does that, he's ready to go free. And it seems like Bullseye is not really happy about it, but he hates Fisk, it seems, more than Vanessa. So he agrees to work for her in order to do the job that needs to be done. Meanwhile, back in present day, after taking that shot for Fisk, Matt is in the hospital, and he tells Heather, like, "Look, Fisk is evil, okay?" And she's like, "Look, I'm gonna come back when you're feeling a little bit better, okay? Goodbye." Because she can't really handle that. And also he tells Kirsten that, like, "Look, Foggy, he was onto something. He was onto something special. And that's why he died. He was murdered for something that he knew. Or like the case that he was doing." But she's also not fully on his side yet. But she's more on his side than Heather is. So I will officially state it right now. I don't really like Heather. I just don't. Initially, she was fine. Man, I wonder what I'm also curious what they're gonna do with her in season 2. That is also what I am very curious about. But so far, I'm not the biggest fan of these new characters. But Fisk makes an announcement to his people that he is gonna have the Vigilante Task Force. No camps, no restrictions, kill vigilantes. And he also wants the city to be sealed, which, you know, the commissioner's kind of like, that's a bit insane, you know? But Fisk is not necessarily gonna budge, and also he tells Buck to go and kill Matt because a dead hero is better than a live vigilante. So basically, Buck is truly the new Wesley, because when in season 1 of Daredevil, Wesley was the one who took care of everything for Fisk. Now we have Buck. Buck is not as cool of a character as Wesley, but I still very much like him. And Fisk also tells Sheila to send all the people who are not loyal to him home. So she goes off to try and do that, and the commissioner talks to her about, you know, like working with him in order to take Fisk down. And also the fact that the commissioner is gonna go up to the Supreme Court in order to try and take Fisk down. But we'll get back to that later on, don't worry about it. So Buck arrives in the hospital, he stands in front of the door, he waits for a little bit, then all of the power shuts off throughout the whole of New York, and he goes in, but Matt has escaped thanks to the blackout. So he goes home, and he just sits on his couch. He's just like, I did not expect to see you here. And when he said that, I was like, it's your boy, it's Punisher. God, I love Punisher. But yeah, Frank is here, and Frank just makes fun of him. It's like, what do they call you now? Like, now nightgown man? And then Matt's like, well, you got a shave and a haircut. Did you do that for me? And he's like, yeah, I did it for you. It's just a fun banter between the two. I love that. I love these two characters interacting. And also, the reason that I love it is because of the fact that they are polar opposites, as in Matt doesn't want anyone dead, but Punisher will just kill anyone. However, the good times can't last, sadly enough. However, for me personally, there's a lot more good times to come, because the task force has arrived in order to take out, well, Matt. So Matt goes upstairs once again. Frank makes a bit of a joke towards Matt. You're not gonna fight them like that with your booty hanging out? So Matt goes upstairs, gets into suit mode, and then the task force arrive inside of the building, but Matt's gone. But then Matt falls from the sky, and he starts fighting, and then Punisher just shoots a guy and also helps with the fight, but Punisher just kills everyone. He just puts someone down and just puts a couple of bullets in him, jumps over like the kitchen table, and just takes people down. It is wonderful, it is bloody, it is gruesome, and I loved every second of it. But Matt did not, because as Matt is fighting, he's like, Frank, stop! And Frank is like, no, I'm not gonna do that. But then the one guy, the black guy, I guess, that is part of the task force, the important one, he is the only one left alive. Well, there's another guy, but we'll get back to him later. However, Frank sees one of his cases and is like, hey, Red, found your guy. Turns out he was the one who shot Hector. But Matt is like, no, I'm not gonna kill him, even though Frank wants him to. And Frank is ready to kill him, and Matt gets in front of it, and Frank is like, really? You're gonna get in front of a bullet again in order to save a bad guy? Which also earlier, Frank asked the question that we all asked ourselves, like, well, why did you jump in front of the bullet for Fisk? And Matt is like, yeah, why did I? Why did I do that? But then they have a little bit of an argument, and during that argument, Frank kills another guy, another corrupt cop. And then they fight some more, but, well, fight as in, verbal fighting, not like actual physical fighting, but basically just an argument. They got a big argument. However, then Matt hears something, and it turns out that a grenade has been thrown, so Matt grabs Frank, and they jump off the building, and he uses his stick in order to save him, save both of them. And the grenade explodes, and they land on a car. And then who is there to arrive but Karen Page? Yep, she's back again. And also, when Frank was earlier like, I got, you know, like, someone asked me to help you, to save you. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that was Karen, most certainly. Because if you haven't watched the Punisher series on Netflix, which is now on Disney+, but the Punisher series, which I actually think is really good. I've seen some people online be not big fans of it, but I think it's actually pretty good. But in that one, we get more of a closer bond between Karen and Punisher, so that's why she has him on speed dial, I guess. So then Karen takes Punisher and Daredevil back to Punisher's hideout, and we have a little bit of talking. You know, Matt's immediately like, okay, so you called him, huh? It's like, well, yeah, I couldn't really call you about it because I know you don't like help, but yeah, I called Frank in order to help you. And Frank is like, anybody want some coffee? However, Matt then reveals to Karen that it turns out the whole Foggy death thing was actually targeted. So they need to go through the files. And Frank is like, I'm no Inspector Gadget. You guys go off. And also, I'm happy to help. In that sense, he basically tells Karen that it's like, yeah, I helped you. And also, please stay safe. Because he does care about Karen. Now, I've seen people equate this to potentially a relationship. I think it's more of like a brother-sister relationship. Instead of like a, you know, husband and wife relationship in that sense. So Matt and Karen go over over to the files from Foggy, and they go through the files. Meanwhile, Daniel is at the city council, and he's basically making a list of targets for Fisk, for the people who don't support Fisk. And also, this is a weird thing. I didn't really like it, but it was more of a subtitle thing, because of the fact that apparently one of the council members, or maybe maybe the whole council, they got like 540,000 euros stashed in like a Swiss bank account. The sign that is in front of the money in the subtitles is actually not the euro sign. Basically, in the subtitles, it says that they have 540,000 pounds, while in the episode he says euro. So I don't know why they chose the pound sign, but that was not at all the euro sign, which is something that kind of annoyed me. Just a little thing, but it's more of a subtitle thing, so I'm not gonna hold it against the show. So as Matt and Karen are, well, as Karen is going through the things, because yes, Matt can indeed see to an extent. He can't read without Braille. He is still blind after all. But Matt talks about heartbeats between, you know, Frank towards Karen, Karen towards Matt, and they're both like, adrenaline, don't worry about it. But he finds a box, and it has like this thing which says avocados at law, and I was like, fucking my boy. And for anyone who does not know, in Spanish, abogados is lawyer. That is what that means in the Spanish language. But Foggy was drunk, so he said avocados at law. Because I think actually Foggy was the one who took Spanish because he liked the girl back in the day. At least that was like explained, like, I think season 1. Anyway, still some really good stuff. And Karen finds the box, so she goes through the files, but it turns out we have a big reveal, and that is the fact that apparently the Red Hook Pier is outside of the law. Literally, it is kind of like a place that for some reason is kind of outside of America. So all of the American laws do not apply there, which makes it also the perfect place to money launder and all that stuff. And Fisk is about to build basically an enterprise on Red Hook Pier. He's basically building himself a mini country in that sense on Red Hook Pier. And Foggy found out about it. However, he did not know to what extent. So when Foggy was gonna use it, it would have exposed everything. So that's why he was killed. Quote unquote killed. We never get the answer whether Foggy's alive or not, but he's gonna be in season 2, so maybe, or maybe it's gonna be flashbacks, I don't know. So they decide to head over to the Red Hook Pier, but that's not the only one, because Frank decides to go there after all, after also stealing a walkie-talkie from one of the corrupt cops earlier. Which, by the way, I've seen a lot of people say online, like, I love to see Frank kill cops. I don't, and Frank doesn't kill cops. These are corrupt cops. We need to make the distinction between the two. Not all cops are bad. There are bad cops. I'm not gonna say that there aren't, but not all of them are bad. Some cops just want to do the right thing. But you have the corrupt cops. And we all love seeing Frank go ahead and kill some corrupt cops. We do love to see that. But Frank goes over to the Red Hook Pier and he assassinates someone from behind, which I thought was actually funny because that's not something that I see. I see Frank kick down the door and just start shooting everyone. I don't really see Frank coming up behind someone and like assassinating them in that sense. But he kills someone, then goes inside and has a bit of a bloodbath, which he sadly enough loses because, you know, this is not your show. All right? Look, if this was your show, you were gonna win this, but it's not your show. This is Daredevil. So, sadly enough, you have to lose. But he does put up a really good fight. He just kills a bunch of people, then gets caught. So after that, we have the fact that, apparently, Sheila went to Fisk with the recording of what the commissioner said. And, yeah... Fisk isn't happy about that. So he takes the commissioner, which, by the way, apparently there's a guy who works for the task force who is black and bald named Luke. But, like, the commissioner gets in. We see this bald black guy, and he says Luke, and I was like, oh, it's Luke Cage. But no, it wasn't. I saw his face in the mirror. I was like, it's not Luke Cage. Oh, why do you tease me? I like Luke Cage, okay? Why do you tease me? I want to see Luke Cage. But basically, this Luke fellow takes the commissioner to Fisk. And then Fisk, with his bare hands, crushes his skull. He puts his hands to his sides of his head and just like starts crushing it. Also, the commissioner's like, yeah, you never stopped being the Kingpin. And I was like, no, he kind of just put a pause on that one. He never stopped being the Kingpin. We can all agree on that one. But he paused it for a little bit. But you know what? Eventually, you gotta hit play again. And that is like the tagline for this episode on like Disney Plus. The summary of the plot for this episode is Mayor Fisk becomes Mayor Kingpin and Daredevil is unleashed as chaos takes over the city. Which, by the way, after the power gets shut down, there is indeed chaos reigns. But then Matt and Karen arrive at the Red Hook Pier and Matt's like, hey Karen, you stay here, I'm gonna go in. And Karen is like, no you're not. If you go in, there's only one of two things that's gonna happen. Either you're gonna kill, or you're gonna be killed. It's as simple as that. And then Matt thinks about it and he's like, I need an army. And I was like, ooh! Now, about that, in Season 2 of Daredevil Born Again, Daredevil's gonna wear a black suit with a little bit of red on it. By the way, I love the design of that suit. Can't wait to see it. But, apparently in the comic books, when Matt wore that suit, he was kind of the leader of the Hand. So, but that's not gonna happen. I don't want that to happen. Please let this be a new version of the Defenders, basically. Matt forming a team of different characters, which, by the way, there's one thing I'm upset about, and that is Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man, and I really want Spider-Man in Daredevil Born Again to be part of Daredevil's team. But apparently Spider-Man is not allowed to be part of Daredevil's team because Spider-Man is not allowed to be in the Marvel Disney Plus shows. At all. Like, he is not... Live action Spider-Man is not allowed to be on TV, according to the deal with Sony, which makes me so upset, and I really want Sony to just lose the rights to Spider-Man and give them back to Marvel. Especially after the last couple of years, now Marvel has figured out that they can't make garbage anymore, and that could only hope... And we can kind of hope for brighter days ahead of us. I hope, anyway. Starting with the next saga, we can have, like, better stuff, better quality content. Because they're not impervious to, you know, failure. So Matt and Karen decide to leave, which is also a thing that I have an issue with about this. I'll talk about that later. Don't you worry about that. Not the fact that Matt leaves, but it's more like the way that the season ends. But anyway, afterwards, the next day, Fisk tells Heather that she becomes the commissioner of mental health under his administration, I guess. And also, he has declared on television that vigilantes are officially illegal and martial law, at least in the city of New York. And martial law will be enacted. And he has a bunch of people in cages, and one of them is Swordsman. The other one is Frank Castle, but we have Swordsman in a cage as well. So he's gonna be returning in the next season of Daredevil Born Again, and Frank is also in a cage. So then, I guess the people who are with Daredevil, they gather at Josie's, and I guess they're ready to take the fight to Fisk. And then to end this episode, we have Frank, who meets a guy named Anthony. He has a little conversation with him, and then he wants to shake his hand. He shakes his hand, pulls his hand in, and breaks his arm. And I guess we could all assume that he just escaped after that. Alright, I am back. Now that we've gone through the combination of the episode talks, let me just talk about the season as a whole, because that's what I wanted to do with this video. At the end of it, I'll talk about the whole season. So, yeah, this was kind of a mess. I will say right now, this was a mess. But to be honest, what else were they supposed to do? This season was supposed to release now. They would not have been able to release it now if they were to, you know, reshoot the whole thing. So I get where they're coming from. And I also understand that in like episode 9 or something like that. By the way, I would also like to say, last week was the 10-year anniversary of the Daredevil series. Just wanted to make note of that. I did remember that. I am also going to be reviewing seasons 1 and 2 later this year. Season 1 will be in May. Season 2 will be in June, I think. And also Defenders in like July or August, one or the other. Well, I forgot which one. But I will be reviewing that, and maybe season 3 as well this year, but I have not recorded that yet. But it was like in episode 8 that Matt's like, look man, this whole thing, like everything that we've seen so far has been leading up to like corrupt cops, which kind of ties the season together, but not really. It just doesn't tie it together all that well. They try, I will say that. However, this season is basically just divided in a couple of things. So starting off, we have, obviously the first episode is just them fixing everything wrong with the whole series. And that is connecting it to the Daredevil show, to the past. Embracing the past. Because initially this wasn't meant to be embracing the past. However, Foggy's death still I'm not happy about it. I told you guys that I would wait until the season was done. Season's done. And we still have not gotten any information about the fact that maybe Foggy's alive or not. So I'm not a fan of this. At all. Now, I have kind of a little bit of an idea that I literally right now thought of, which I will talk about a little bit later. It has to do with like the whole ending of the season. But we didn't really get any information about like Foggy being alive, which makes me very upset because, you know, I wish we got that. But to be honest, Frank freeing himself was also a really cool ending scene. And the fact that this season ends with like Daredevil will return in season 2. I like that, but I am not a fan of Foggy's death. If Foggy is truly dead, that will actually be a stain on this season. I kind of held out a little bit of hope, which I shouldn't. I keep learning in life that you shouldn't have hope. Simple as that. Pandora was wrong. But Twitter kind of made me have a little bit of hope because of that whole storyline of Foggy's secret life or whatever it was called. I don't remember what it's called. But then we get into the White Tiger storyline, which that storyline I very much liked, except for the ending where Hector gets shot, which I understand why he gets shot, as in like the whole police corruption, having his niece become the new White Tiger in potentially season 2. By the way, I will say this, the actor who portrayed White Tiger, Camar de los Reyes, I saw him actually recently in The Rookie, because that's a series that I'm watching right now, and I didn't know. So when I saw him as police captain, I was like, or like the detective leader or whatever, I was like, it's White Tiger. Oh my god. But anyway, that storyline was done really well, except for the end. Like, I love the whole courtroom scene that we get with this, the fact that he actually wins the case. There are a little bit of muddy things, like I feel like the court would not really rule in his favor fully because of what the other guy said, the Revenge of the Fallen guy. He was like, look, okay, yeah, White Tiger's done some good stuff, but let's be honest, anyone can do bad stuff as well. So I don't know. But and also the fact that it's like, hey, don't talk about his White Tiger status, and then Matt just pulls it out. I thought that was funny. Like, he just pulls it out like, that's White Tiger. It's like, come on, dude, you just said I wasn't allowed to do this stuff. After that, we get the worst storyline in this season. Well, kind of. We get the Mew storyline after a couple of quote-unquote in-betweener episodes, or filler episodes, some people call at least episode 6. Because we have the episode where that one black guy basically stole some breakfast, which I did not like that storyline, because it just, to me, it's like, you are running away from responsibility, which is something that I don't like. Maybe it's just me, you know, but for me, it fully fell flat. I've seen, like, that kind of storyline done on, like, The Rookie, kind of, you know, with, like, the police just arresting black people for no reason at all. On The Rookie, they actually did that pretty well, but this time, it was just like, dude, you missed the appointment. It was your fault. You have no one else to blame but yourself. And the bank episode, the filler episode as people call it. I actually very much enjoyed that episode. Next season better not have any filler episode. I need that season to be focused. But then we get into the Mew storyline, I guess, which we already went into with like the with interest. Actually, episode 5 and 7 are the Mew storyline. But still, we then have the Mew storyline, which is entirely bad. Kind of. The beginning, the with interest part, was actually not that bad. The problem is episode 7, where we get like a bare bones backstory of like a villain of the day, and then he basically gets killed. Now, Muse has been confirmed to be in season 2, so we'll have to wait and see how that's gonna play out. I think it's gonna be like nightmares that Heather is gonna have, and that's how Muse will be in the next season. I think he's actually dead, but who knows? Hey, we'll have to wait and see, right? We'll have to wait and see how that's gonna go. But like, it was fully the old team, and the action scene just wasn't really that good. Everything was a cut, and it just annoys me. The fighting choreography from episode 5 to episode 7, it's just like, it is so clear how that was made by 2 different people, and I really wish that they redid episode 7 as well, that final fight, in order to make it look better, because it is kind of like a stain on the episode overall. But then we get to the finale, which kind of, like I said, tries to tie everything together, and overall I enjoyed that a lot, which gives me faith, like I said, for season 2. I'm very excited about season 2, and also potentially the prospect, the future that they could do, because I have like I said, I have an idea about Foggy, so I'm going to talk about that right now, and that is Elektra. Because Elektra and the Hand storyline, people think that like the Hand is gonna be in the next season because of the fact that that is the storyline from the comics. Apparently the storyline is called Devil's Reign. Apparently it's not really that good, and also Matt becomes leader of the Hand. I don't want that. I want, instead of the Hand, it to be like a new version of the Defenders. But since Elektra could be part of it, she could bring Foggy back to life as a gift for Matt. That is something that she could potentially do. That could be a storyline. That's how they do the secret life of Foggy. Like, yeah, he was killed, but now he's back. He is just alive again. Simple as that. I would love to see that, because I just don't want Foggy to die. However, I don't want to see Daredevil in charge of the Hand. I want to see Daredevil be in charge of the new set of, like, Defenders. I want them to bring back all of Netflix. Give me Iron Fist. Give me Luke Cage. Give me Jessica Jones. Give me Colleen Wing and Misty Knight and Elektra. Have all of them team up with Daredevil and then, you know, form the new Defenders. And we can also add in some other characters. I actually saw an image about that online. About that where it's like, oh yeah, it could. Here we go. I found the image. It's of Echo, Misty Knight, Spider-Man, Iron Fist, Moon Knight, Luke Cage, Daredevil, and Jessica Jones as well. All of them teaming up. That will be actually pretty cool. I don't think Spider-Man is going to be in it because it was stated that Spider-Man isn't really allowed to be in these Disney Plus shows. But let's be honest here. If anything can happen, Marvel could make a deal. Could have already made a deal. However, I don't know how that's going to work with Tom Holland's schedule. Because Tom Holland is going to be filming like the next Christopher Nolan film. He's going to be in the Odyssey. So, I don't know if he has time to show up in a couple episodes of Daredevil Born Again. I would love to see Tom Holland in Daredevil Born Again. Maybe he will be able to provide the voice and we'll have Spider-Man in costume for the whole thing. But I think that instead of Spider-Man, what we're going to get is a new White Tiger. They're gonna set that up in season 2 and actually, you know, do that. And I don't mind Echo being part of this team. Yeah, sure, we can have Echo in here. And Moon Knight, I'm kind of confused about because after I watched the end of Moon Knight, it's like I really need a season 2 to that thing in order to kind of wrap it up because Moon Knight is now still around, but the other two personalities don't know about that. And there's a third personality who we don't even know if he's good or not because he just kind of seems evil. So why would Moon Knight work with the Defenders for this? Like, it wouldn't really make sense. I really wish Moon Knight just got that second season in order to wrap up its storyline, but we did not get that. But overall, I just want to see Daredevil have like a new team. Also with Elektra, by the way. Elektra is not in this image, but I would like to see Elektra. Maybe Elektra instead of Moon Knight and White Tiger instead of Spider-Man. Maybe that could work. Because of the fact that Fisk is going after all these vigilantes, which, well, you know, they gotta fight back somehow. So let's have them fight back. However, I will have a little bit of an issue with this. And I talked about it, I think, in the episode 9 talk. But my issue with this season is also the fact it just ends, dude. It's like, it's just one season cut into 2, which makes me think, are you not going to give us like a season 3 of Daredevil? Because I would very much like, because we don't have payoff. Because like at the end of season 1 of Daredevil, it ends with Fisk going into prison. Technically, season 3 ends that same way. And then in season 2, we have the defeat of the Hand, kind of, but not really, because they'll be back in Defenders. But still, like, the people that we have to beat in Daredevil season 2, we beat, in that sense. And now it's like, oh yeah, hey, by the way, the season is done. We need a team to take on the bad guys. See you next year. It's like, I don't like it. But I don't know how they're gonna do, like, a new version of the Defenders, because it's filming right now. And apparently, according to Wikipedia, which I know is not a source for any official information, but the filming began in late February and is scheduled to end in July. So maybe in June, we're gonna get like this big leak of like the whole Defenders coming back, because everyone has basically kind of expressed interest in coming back, which I would be very happy about. I mean, mainly like, you know, I mean, Krista Ritter wouldn't mind coming back. Mike Coulter doesn't really mind. And Finn Jones has also stated like, just give me another chance, please. I want to be Iron Fist again, okay? Look, the Netflix people kind of did me dirty. Also, season 2 was better than season 1, and people only really know about season 1. I don't even think most people understand that season 2 of Iron Fist exists. But that one was a lot better, and if Marvel can write Iron Fist a lot better, Finn Jones is just an actor. He is just an actor portraying the role. And I know people will say, oh, but it should be an Asian. No, it shouldn't. That's the whole point of the Iron Fist storyline. A privileged white boy gets shown the real world in that sense. But anyway, gets training in Asia. It's kind of like Yasuke in Assassin's Creed Shadows. You know how we have a foreigner comes into the land, learns about it, and then, you know, becomes part of it. That is kind of Iron Fist. He gets the Iron Fist and defends Kunlun, even though technically he doesn't, because the Hand kind of attacked Kunlun, so we don't know what the future situation is of Kunlun, but still. Iron Fist is supposed to be white, or at least Danny Rand is supposed to be white, let's just say that. But I would like to see Finn Jones back as well. I just want to see all of it, so that I could be like, it's all connected, even though it technically is. But I also want to see what these characters have been up to. But the season isn't perfect. It is very chopped together, and I hate it. Like, it's like, you know, chopped up, like Frank Castle said in the other episode. I'll chop him up. It's like, but then it's like like put together with like tape, and it's just not good enough, you know. This is the worst season, as I said in my review. This is most certainly the worst season of the Daredevil storyline, I guess. It's not as good as the Netflix stuff. It is better than Iron Fist season 1, but outside of that, all of the other Netflix stuff is better than this. So depending, of course, on your opinion on that, but I liked all of the Netflix stuff. I will do reviews for all of that stuff eventually. I've already recorded everything up until Defenders, but I need to get past Defenders, and I'll do that this summer. At least I'll record it this summer and then hopefully go have it uploaded over the weeks. But I'm also curious to see if Punisher is gonna be in season 2. What is it with Punisher, by the way? But every time Punisher appears in one of these Daredevil seasons, it's just like the worst thing. Because like in Daredevil season 2 is the worst of like the original Daredevil run, and that's the Punisher season. And now we get Punisher back for Born Again, and the season is once again kind of like chopped up and all that stuff stitched together, kind of like season 2 was, but then worse than season 2 because this time it actually was like that. But I can't wait to see what they're gonna do in Daredevil season 2. I also don't really know why Karen Page painted her hair. Like she had like a different hair color in the behind the scenes set photos for Daredevil Born Again season 2. Like, why? Why does she have that? That makes no sense. Also, I've seen people complain about Spider-Man throughout the whole Daredevil Born Again episode 9 talk on Twitter, because it's like, okay, so the New York turns into a war zone. Where's Spider-Man? Which, to be honest, New York is pretty big. So Spider-Man could be fighting outside of... Oh, God. But outside of the view of the camera, you know? Kind of like how... Oh, yeah, but the bald woman, the ancient one, was fighting during Avengers. But we just didn't see her during Avengers. But she was fighting during the Avengers. So they could do something like that, but I just really want to see Spider-Man and Daredevil interact. But also, how is that gonna work with, like, first of all, we don't know when Spider-Man is coming out, but we can say, I could say confidently that this that season 2 is probably gonna take place not that long after. Like, Daredevil Born Again season 2 cannot take place that long after season 1 of Daredevil Born Again, right? Am I wrong in that saying that? Because it feels like, you know, like next week is when they will take on in continuity, I mean. So according to rumors, Spider-Man Brand New Day is gonna be taking place alongside Doomsday. But I don't really have much else to say, so I'm just gonna end the spoiler talk here. Like I said, I enjoyed the season. You can check my review for the score, but I did enjoy the season, even though it wasn't the best thing. I will rank it though as the second best season on the Disney Plus from Marvel, but that's because nothing else can compete with this except for Loki season 2, which is the only thing on the Disney Plus side which I will actually say is like good. Actually, it's really, really good, season 2 of Loki, but still, it's the only thing that I would say is good, because I don't like anything else that Marvel has put on Disney Plus. Everything else has fallen flat or has been She-Hulk and Secret Invasion, which is garbage. Those two are garbage properties, with Secret Invasion being full-on garbage and She-Hulk being saved by, funny enough, Daredevil. But the rest of the stuff has been kind of like just like barely average, like in that average scene. And then we have Born Again, which for me is the score that I gave it, but it's like worse than the other Netflix stuff, but not like very, like a lot worse. It is a lot worse than like season 1 and 3 of Daredevil, but it's not like super worse than season 2 of Daredevil. But like nothing on Disney Plus really comes close to that. So yeah, this is the second best thing on Disney Plus in my opinion, and I would recommend you guys watch that. So that has been the compilation spoiler talk of Daredevil Born Again. So let me know your spoilery thoughts in the comment section down below about Daredevil Born Again. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Were you somewhere in between? Let me know in that comment section down below and all that stuff. And with that being said, thank you all so very much for watching, and I hope you guys have enjoyed. And if you did, please like button, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Turn on notifications. Don't forget to check out the Let's Play channel, link in the description and at the end of the video. And I'll see you guys next year for Daredevil Born Again season 2, and in May for Daredevil season 1, June for Daredevil season 2, and August I think for the Defenders, and also potentially the end of the year for Daredevil season 3 reviews. So I'll see you for all that stuff. Bye.